At the end of my talk, there's a question, and the answer will be, if you're careful, you can figure out the answer by the end of the talk. Okay. The question is, how do you earn $1 million in the bicycle business? Okay. So.
And you want to know how?
No, I've done it. I've done it. So I just want you that's just something to watch out for, that little thing there. At the end, we'll have let's see if anybody guesses it. Okay, so this is the history of the Bicycle Man. It's also called 58 Years and 45 Minutes. And this is the first place I made a living at the bicycle business. This is other places. We'll get there. We'll get there. So in 1966, I was helping a friend clean out his parents' garage, and his mom said, first thing you do is throw out those 2 bicycles. And I said, can I use your phone? And my mom and dad lived 2 miles down the street, and they came up. Mom brought up the old 61 Rambler wagon, stuffed them in the back, and dragged them home. And just in case you think I've come very far in this business, the garage we were cleaning out is the red barn next to the parking lot. So I haven't come very far. Just a little bit south. You know, I've gone south just a little, so physically, yeah. And so I dragged them home, and, you know, I was playing with them. I had a bike, and, you know, but these were old beaters. They were like from the 30s or something. And I took one apart and I got the other one to work, and I rode it around a little bit. But I already had a better bike, so I took a piece of plywood and I painted it white, and I painted in black paint. I painted for sale and a $. And then I would fill in with electrical tape, numbers, right? So the first one was $14 for a bike. And I put it out I C-clamped it onto the newspaper box post and put the bike out front. We're 2 miles down the road here where I grew up, where I spent my formative years. Grow up, I'm still working on that. And so a guy stops to look at the bike, and it was $14, and he bought it. Okay, good. So I got Mom to take me to the local bike shop, which was in Arkport at the time, and I bought a tire and whatever else I needed to put the other one back in. I got the other one done. Now that one was $19 because I had a new tire and stuff on it, right? And I put it out, and somebody came and they looked at it and they rode it. I always had people ride things because, you know, they may be ugly, but it works, okay? That's what my wife says about me, but, you know. So they would ride it, and then they'd buy it. So he said he'd like to buy it, but do I take trade-ins? And I'm like, I'm not sure what a trade-in is, but yeah, I'll do that. I was 11. And he came back with a bike. You know, he was buying a bike that was probably from the late 30s. And this was 66. He was selling me a bike that was probably from the early 60s, but didn't work. Mine worked. So I gave him $1 off. He's like, oh, good. I was like, oh, I take trade-ins. So we still take trade-ins for more than $1, almost always. And I got that one to work well. By then, the next thing you knew, people heard that I did repairs, and they would stop in to have me fix their bike. And then a pickup truck would stop in with a bunch they're cleaning out the barn. They've got them heaped up in the back of the pickup truck bikes, and I'd give them $1 for the whole load, and they'd say, oh boy, we could have a milkshake on the way home. And so in 1972, we had a flood, Hurricane Agnes, and my bike shop was in my parents' basement. On my LinkedIn page, it says that in 1975, I decided to pursue the bicycle business full-time rather than a degree. Okay, when I gave a talk at RPI about bicycle design and testing and stuff, they wanted a blurb that they could introduce me with. So I went to my LinkedIn page and downloaded that, and instead I dropped out. I emailed it to a friend and said, could you do something that would be honest but sound better than that? So that's what she came up with. Well, that's much better, yeah. I decided to pursue the bicycle business full time. That was in 75, I went full time. So the next picture, see the sign here says 1966. A friend of mine made the sign, Roger Woodruff, who works at Tinkertown, made the sign for me, painted 66 on it because that's what I remembered. But then we were remodeling our house, and my wife found a box that was full of old papers, and one of the papers I wrote in high school, and it said that I'd started in 69. Well, obviously, the historical document is more accurate than my old memory, right? So I spent a few years telling people it was actually 69, and this is a mistake, okay? But my dad passed away, and I got all the family pictures, hundreds of pounds of them. And there's this picture, and this is a picture that he took because it was windy and cold, and there's a snowdrift in front of the car in the garage. The wind blew past the car and drifted, and he thought that was cool, so he took a picture. Okay? Now, both of these cars were replaced in the summer of '68, and there are 3 bicycles in the picture. I had 1 sister. I'm in business. 66. How did I know? Okay, right. So then this is really the first picture of the bike shop, but what I always thought was the first picture of the bike shop was when the water receded in the basement after the flood of '72. I had like 20 bikes down there, and Dad just took some pictures of the basement. And this is the first picture of the actual work area of the bike shop when the water went down. And I don't remember putting that fork on there. I think I got it like that. You know, I don't think I did that because the steering geometry, yeah, it's all bad. What you do is you cut it off above the bend, and then you don't muck up the steering geometry nearly as bad. So that's what you do.
Is that what the saw is for?
Yes, that would be the saw, yeah. And this is an antique blacksmith fight. They say it's worth about $500, so yeah, neat.
Why is the weights attached to a handle? Is that
Because I made a thing that I could do this with.
okay?
Like, and I could do all different, yeah, like that. Yeah, because I was going to be hot looking and get girls.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to do that someday.
Big stripes.
So one time I was out in the front yard selling a bike, and it was a girl's bike, or I forget, it was one or the other, and the customer came and rode it and said, yeah, I would buy it, but I want the other sex, right? I don't want a girl's bike, I want a men's bike. And I said, hang on, and I ran down in the basement. I came out with another frame. I said, how about this one? He goes, oh, yeah, but it's missing all the parts. I said, come back Thursday. So I went down in the basement. I didn't have a repair stand. I put the bike upside down on the seat and handlebars, and I swapped all the parts, right? See? No problem. Well, the only problem is when the bike is upside down, it's easy to get left and right confused. So I put the bike together backwards, which means you could pedal backward and go backward, and you could pedal forward and put on the brakes. I spent a little while trying to learn to balance backwards. Then I just fixed it and sold it to him.
Male, female, left to right.
Yeah.
To back. It was all.
Well, that's all upside down. So this was 1972. I was junior, so that year was biology. And our biology teacher was really, really good, and most students were going to get a better grade on the regents than they got in the class. And the agreement in this with the school was, if you do better in the regents, we'll bump up your class grade. Well, I didn't do that well in class because I was the kind of student that we'd get to school and they'd give us books and a locker combination. I'd collect up all the books and put them in the locker and lock it. And then the last day of school, I'd go, oh, I forgot my combination. They'd give me the combination, go back, unlock it, get the books out, pristine condition, and take them and turn them in. So, yeah, I didn't do a lot of homework, but I was going to bump it up with the Regents, right? Well, the Regents was canceled because of the flood. So, but my friend and I were planning to ride around Lake Ontario. And as soon as the Regents was canceled, we said, cool, we can go now. And Mom said, no, you have to wait until it's not a federal disaster area. All right, we waited a few days and rode to Canada. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, we're really unprepared. On the trip, you were talking about the stuff you carried. We met a couple, and we were riding. We had, this bag here was for a sleeping bag, and I stuffed all of my clothing on top of the sleeping bag on top of that, right? We had nothing. We just had almost nothing. The tent leaked when it rained, and, he had a headlight, and I had a rear reflector because we were lightweight guys, right? So, yeah. He had a pump and I had a patch kit and the little Mayfac tire toolkit. That's all the tools we had. So we were really unprepared and we had a great time, So the moral of the story is if you have the time to take off and do the trip, but you don't have the money to get the ideal equipment, have a nice trip. Otherwise, you can wait until you have the money, and by then you have a job and you don't have the time. Right? So just go enjoy yourself and have a good time. So when we got to Canada, at the the customs. They let us out of the States, no problem. Getting into Canada, they asked where are you going, how much money do you have on you, what are you going to do there? And we told them, like, okay. And then he said, no, I've got this bike and it makes this noise in second gear, and okay. So we got to Canada, we came back, it was fun. Another mistake we made on the trip was one day one problem we had was that we packed the bikes and all the bags were full, right? And then the first day we're riding along, it came to be lunchtime, we went to a grocery store and got some groceries and walked out to the bikes and went, oops, there's nowhere to put them. So we bungee corded a loaf of bread on the top of the rack. We had the funniest shaped sandwiches. I'll tell you, they were funny shaped peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And so one day we're riding along, we went down to the side of Lake Ontario in Canada to have our lunch at this yacht club. We drove it in, whatever. And we're walking around. There's this guy who's he's on a 1935 30-foot motorboat with a Chris Craft big, brass and mahogany and beautiful. And he said, yeah, we just rebuilt the engine. I'm going to take it out and prove it. You want to come? And I said, how long are you going to be out? And he said, I'll be out all day. I'll be back before dark. And we're like, my friend had to get home because his parents were then going to go see his brother that we left. We just saw his brother, but we had to get back so that he could get back to see, anyway. So we didn't do that, okay? You need to leave space in your schedule to enjoy the trip, not just hammer the miles, although hammering miles is fun, so anyway. Now, the next story is my dad was a professor, so of course I'm going to go to college when I get out of high school. So I went to college and I majored in recreational pharmacology, actually. Right? That's what I did. And but the people people would still call my parents to get their bike fixed, and they would give them my dorm room number, and they'd bring the bikes up to the dorm. And I was on the 4th floor, and people were complaining about the bikes going up and down the stairs. So, they gave me a room on the ground floor just for the bikes, and I paid the rent on that room by giving a class once a week at the dining hall about bicycles. So, if someone came to class, which they did sometimes, what do you want to talk about? Well, I want to talk about buying a bike, fixing a bike, riding a bike, whatever. Let's talk about bikes. So that was good. I got sort of paid to talk about bikes, which is, I like that. So then my dad sat me down and said, looked at my GPA and said, you really should either buckle down and start studying or do something else because you're wasting my money. So I decided to do something else. I decided to pursue the bike business full time. Yeah, so that's what I did. But I'd met this guy, Willie Hand. This is Willie and Dolly. And I asked Willie, could I move into your house and sell bicycles and repair bicycles? He said, oh, that'd be great. So we went to the house, and he showed me all the bedrooms. And notice all the bikes on the porch here? That was the showroom the first year. So we went upstairs, and he showed me all the rooms. Now, back then they didn't have the term hoarder, okay? Willie had moved into the house in 1920. And he'd been alone in the house since sometime in the 50s. And he didn't bring lots of stuff in the house, but he didn't take anything out, okay? So it was kind of full, but there was one room that was empty. And I said, and rather than empty all these, whatever, I'll take that one. So it was small, but whatever, I'll take that room, okay. And you know why it was empty? He raised chickens in that room. The first inch was really full. The rest of it was empty. So I scraped up all the chicken poo, and the first night I put my cot, he had a little metal cot thing, I put that down and fell into bed tired from scraping the poo. And the house was old, and he wasn't real good on maintenance, right? So his dad had bought some bricks to repair the chimney, and they were stacked right here by the door. But I eventually moved them because, they're kind of my showroom. So I moved them. But they'd been there long enough that they'd accumulated water, and the floor under had rotted. So, so it's good to not worry about things. Willie didn't worry about stuff. It's also good to maintain things. So there's a balance. He hadn't repaired the roof. The first time I collapsed into that bed, one of the legs went through the floor. So I got up and pulled it out of the floor and moved it over and went back to sleep. So that was the first year I ran the bike shop there just with the bikes I had on the porch that I'd collected since I was 11. Used stuff. I didn't buy anything new, really, hardly at all. I'd buy bikes and stuff for parts. And one day a guy came in and I had a bike on the front porch that was a 3-speed that worked. Everything worked, $35. And the guy needed a flat tire fixed, which is $5. But I was out of patches and I didn't have a tube that size. And I'm sitting there thinking, should I try to, because the tube in the front of that bike would have fit his bike and I could have got $5. I could eat for a week on $5. But then I couldn't sell the bike until I rode to Arkport and so I sold the flat tire. Fixed the flat tire for $5. Then after I'd done it for a whole year, my parents, I was at my parents, again, lived so this was like 10 miles from my house to my parents' house, from Willie's house to my parents' house. And I would come there once a week and eat like crazy and do laundry, right? And Mom would check my pulse. I hadn't killed myself yet with, living at Willie's house. She was not very impressed with that whole thing. So one night we were sitting in the kitchen and Mom and Dad were having a conversation. And I believe it was Mom that Dad said, we ought to loan him $2,000 because he's not going to college. He's saving us a fortune. We should loan him $2,000 for the bike business. And Mom said, he'll lose it. He'll lose it in that business thing. He'll lose it. And Dad said he'll get a $4,000 lesson out of that $2,000. So, by golly, I bought new bikes. And this was the living room, it was Willie's old living room. I cleaned out the living room and the sitting room, and they became the showroom. Now, do you wonder why I put the pegboard up there? Isn't that kind of an awkward place for pegboard? Why didn't I put it down here? Well, there's plaster on the wall down here, so I put the pegboard where there's no plaster. So, yeah, we did that. And the ceiling I covered with burlap, stapled it up to the ceiling. It was in rough shape. So then a friend of mine and I, another couple moved in, and they then started Northern Lights Candles in Wellsville, and I'm sure they sold that for over $1 million. They had, 50 employees or something. So 2 businesses started in that house that I know of. That was this one and theirs. And but Willie and Tina and Andy were going to go sign up for food stamps, asked me if I wanted to come. I said, sure. I went over there and sat down, and the lady interviewing me, I gave her my books, and she looked at it and said, no, you're lying. And I said, well, no, I'm not. And she said, well, nobody could live on that. And I said, well, I live on $5 a week. She says, how do you pay the rent? And I said, well, Willie doesn't charge us rent. And she said, yeah, how do you pay the utilities? And I said, well, there aren't any utilities. She said, you mean Willie pays the utilities too? No, there aren't any utilities. We don't have water, electric, or gas, or a phone. We don't have that stuff here. We're poor. And she said, well, no one should have to live like that. If you would just rent an apartment, we would send you a check the first of every month. We'd pay the rent, we'd pay the utilities, and we'd send you a check, and we'd give you food stamps. And I said, well, I don't want to give up. She said, if you give up this silly bicycle thing. And I said, I don't want to give up the silly bicycle thing. So she said, okay, then we'll give you food stamps, but we're going to come inspect the house. And when we discover that you're lying, you're going to be in big trouble. So they sent a guy, and he walked around the house with a clipboard, and he said, oh, my God, you're not going to have any problem from us. And his report, he took the report back to the county seat and turned it in, and a copy of it went to the Board of Health, and they evicted us. So I got food stamps 1 month, and then I had to move and reapply. So now I had $2,000 worth of new bicycles plus all the old ones and no place to go. And I was like, oh, life is over. What am I going to do? And I went to my parents and told them this tale of woe. And they said, find a place for rent in Alfred. Tell us what it'll cost. And I found a pizza shop that had just closed because he was into recreational pharmacology a whole lot more than I was, I'll tell you. I was there at a party in the back of his pizza shop when someone came in selling cocaine, and he walked out and raided the till to buy the cocaine. So that was the end of that. And it was $200. And my parents said, okay, here's what we'll do. The first year, we'll give you $200 a month. Second year, we'll give you $150, and then $100, and then $50. And aren't they smart, right? Enough rope to hang yourself, but not a gallows or something, right? So this was the old pizza shop. This is my mom sitting on the floor here. And that's me, building the wheel. We still have this park repair stand. Park repair stands are rugged, okay? They're good. Buy Park. Everything Park makes except for pumps. The pumps they made for a while were terrible. Everything else they do is really good, and their warranty is good. So in this picture, I'm repairing a bike, and I remember standing at that repair stand. We still have that repair stand too. No, we don't. That was a really crappy repair stand, but I didn't have any money, so that was crappy. But I remember. What? Yeah. See?
Really good repair.
Yeah, it was great. So much lighter than a park repair stand, more portable. So I was standing there one night, it was about midnight, and I'm repairing a bike, and I'm thinking, boy, the business is really starting to get busy. I'm going to be able to make some money. This is going to be great. And then it occurred to me, I'm still doing repairs at midnight. How much busier can I get? And I said, I need to learn to do repairs quicker and more efficiently. And this was my showroom. And if you'll notice this bike here, this is a Bob Jackson. Okay? Ta-da! My bike. So a friend of mine, Tom Biebel, had this bike he wanted to sell. He bought a Mozzie super bike. And the frame cracked, and he sent it in on warranty, and he bought the Bob Jackson so that he had something to ride in the meantime. There was a race coming up in Hornell. Now, he had a friend of his, Dwayne, who came from Trexlertown. Now, how many people know Trexlertown is where the East Coast bicycle track is, right? So I'm like, oh my God, finally a big racer showed up and gonna kick my butt. And so the night before, they were both at the shop, and I was doing some tinkering on Tom's bike, and Dwayne was there. And Dwayne's bike was there. And Dwayne was going on and on and on about how his bike had a 54-tooth chainring. And Tom only had a 53. And he was going to win, just do the math, right? I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. On and on, again and again. Finally, I was full of it. And I went over and looked at his bike, and then I went over to Dwayne and I said, Dwayne, you really think the high gear is going to win the race tomorrow? And he said, absolutely. And I went to Tom and said, congratulations, Tom. And Dwayne's like, what do you mean? He's only got a 53. You have a 14 in the back. He has a 13 in the back. His gear is like 8% higher than yours. Oh, yeah? Well, if you're so smart, why don't you come to this race tomorrow? And I said, well, I'll be there again this year. Oh, yeah? How'd you do last year? I said, well, I'm undefeated since they started the race. He said, oh, yeah? And what chain rings do you have? Well, I have a 45, and I paused. He said, yeah, and what's the big one? I said, well, it's 45. It's a 45-28 is what I've got. So, oh, my God, 45-28, we're going to get to the top of the hill. We're all going to shift in the big ring. You're already going to be in the big ring, and you forget it, you're never going to.
Nice.
Peter Stahl, Tom Biebel, Dwayne. Next question. Thank you very much, folks. Coming down to Dwayne he had an orange jersey on, and in my rearview mirror, I could tell that was Dwayne back there, right? Tom and I were neck and neck up till the finish. I out-sprinted him. I was a pretty good sprinter. So I knew that Tom knew that my high gear was not I wanted a 48. I ordered the crank with a 48. The 48 wasn't in stock. I got a 45. So he knew that was an issue for me, right? So we're sprinting up to the finish, and I pull out from behind him, and I sprint past him, and I'm waiting until in my peripheral vision, I see him look over like this. And then I abruptly, as loudly as I could, I went that last gear into high. Okay, the picture of the finish, Tom is like this, and I'm like, because I'm spinning out, folks, He's still got lots of gear left. He let me go. Whatever, anyway, I got away.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The previous picture.
Yep.
That tandem, is that seat above the handlebars? The green one?
This one, yeah. The seat just above the rear handlebar.
Normally went?
Yep.
I never saw
That's a stock. And when
What's up with the gnomes? Why are the gnomes on the side of the
Oh, these are candles. Remember Tina and Andy? The guy that taught Tina and Andy to make candles was selling candles in my bike shop. That was back in the day when I would take any job that had a payday, okay?
Candles.
We had an ice storm, and I had a chainsaw and a station wagon, so by golly, I put an ad in the paper and I did tree removal. I closed the shop and did tree removal for a week. It was more profitable than, it was early in the year, you know. So, you know, any job with a payday. So, as long as we're talking about the tandem, let me tell you, when I moved, this place had plumbing, which was a big step up from Willie's house, except one time I went away and blah, blah, blah. When I came back, the plumbing was all frozen. I heated with wood. And a friend of mine was going to stay there and keep the stove lit, and he didn't, and I came back and it was frozen. I've had, you know, I mean, the toilet broke, okay? Everything. Yeah. And the landlord was a lawyer. I'm like, oh my God. And now it's really over because the landlord's going to sue me first, and then I'll have no place. What am I going to do? And so I found another building we'll talk about in a minute. But when I moved down here, I rode the bikes down one by one. And it was this building was right next to the traffic light in Alfred, where students would hitchhike to get to the grocery store. So I'd look out the window, and if there's anybody hitchhiking, we had 2 tandems. I took a tandem. I'd pick them up, give them a ride to the grocery store. Real cool, right? Then I'd hitchhike back, and that's how I got there. That's how we moved into the next building. Cool. So this is that. And then in 75, winter of 75, 76, I think it was, there was mountain bikes on the cover of Bicycling magazine. And I thought, well, that looks like fun. I could do that. You know, they were taking old Schwinn's and changing the parts and, you know, the clunkers and the repack downhill and, you know, Tom Ritchie and all those guys. They were, you know, anyway. So I thought that would be fun. So we call it Bikezilla. It had a rear disc brake and a mechanical, horrible brake. Never could lock up the tire, except on ice. It would lock up on ice. And it had a 5-speed with a Shimano Barcon lever and, you know, yeah, it was heavy and, you know. But I was able to date the making of that bike because a picture of it got put in Bicycling magazine, won the photo contest. And the photographer who submitted the picture got a phone call from the photo editor of Bicycling magazine, right? And he said, why are there 2 f-stops and 2 shutter speeds in your tech on this picture? And she said, think about it. He's like, what? Anybody want to guess why? It's a fake photo. Yeah, they took a picture of the bike and cut, you know, razor blade. This is before Photoshop. Razor blade, cut it out to scale, the whole deal. Put the bike up there, but it was one of those flat gray winter days, and it didn't look real. So she drew in some clouds. Now it looks much better. And notice that fear is the dark room where your negatives are developed. Pun? See? Yep.
Write it down.
And then the plumbing froze. I already told that story. And then I went to a party and I was kind of dejected, and somebody said, what's wrong? And I said, oh, yeah, I'm getting shop infected and I'm looking for a place. I'm looking for some beat up old house I could buy really cheap that had, you know, that could run like Willie's house. And they said, the garage next door is for sale. $5,000. Used to be a schoolhouse. I looked in the window and I went, oh, perfect. A big empty room for $5,000. Perfect. So for a second, back to the landlord who was a lawyer, right? I'd been gone for 2 weeks. He was going to sue me to death or something. And I went to the post office. I got the stack of mail, and I'm going through the mail, throwing out all the junk. And there's a letter from the landlord. I'm like, oh my God, how did he know already? There's a letter from his law office. And I opened the letter, and it said, due to a change in our insurance, immediately stop using the wood stove. I did. So I called him up Monday. He said, yeah, I stopped using the wood stove. They said, oh, good, thank you. I said, yeah, and the pipes all froze. What? I said, well, you know, what did the previous, I can't use the wood stove. Well, what did the previous tenant heat it with? I said, remember the pizza ovens you sold? He went, oh. So then he's talking about court and, you know. So I went to the town or the village, and I read the law, and it was clearly on my side, and that was the end of that. So I bought this place. Anyway, enough of that. I don't know when I started, but I bet I'm going to go over time. Start yawning when you want me to stop. It usually works. It works for Linda. She yawns, I go, okay, I'm done. So here it is with the garage door. And when we were open, I'd open the doors. When we were closed, I'd close the doors. I mean, what are you going to do? But there was a barn up the street, and somebody had taken down a store and saved the storefront. And so I bought the storefront for $100. And a friend of mine and I put it in August of '79. And two neat things about that. One, we know that the storefront was from 1879 because when they took it apart, they pulled the hinge pins out. And when we were putting it back together, we took the hinges off, and under the hinge pins, there was an advertising for a shim. There was an advertising postcard with a legible postage mark. It was 1879. It was 100 years old the time we moved it. So that was pretty cool. The other thing that was cool about it was the barn I found it in. We bought that property at auction in 2018. It's about a mile from here. It's really nice, and we got a good deal, and we're so happy. And one day I got a phone call from somebody saying, hey, do you buy old bicycles? I said, yeah, I buy old bicycles. That's where it started, was buying old bicycles. And I said, bring it in. He said, no, I can't bring it in. And I said, well, you have to come to Dansville to see it. I'm not going to go to Dansville just because for every used bike. I was more polite than that, but yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Well, let me describe it to you. The front wheel's 5 feet in diameter. What's your address? So I called my dad. Dad, fire up the Chevette. We got to go. And he put the trailer on the Chevette, and we drove to Dansville. On the way up there, I've got my checkbook. I'm balancing it to the penny. And we got there and looked it over, and it's like, it's my size, and I can make it work. I didn't care. I didn't know what it was worth. I don't care. I want it. Yeah. Got to have that. And I said, what do you want for it? He says, well, it was in the antique shop on Main Street for 2 years for $2,000. And I said, I got $400 in my checkbook. He said, okay, I'll take it. So I had a high wheel. Wow. I was making like $8,000 a year or $7,000 a year. I was living in the back of the shop. I had a high wheel. Woohoo! I was a happy camper. This was a great thing. So this is the inside of the shop. Judging from the mountain bikes there, this is from the early 80s, would be my guess. I got married. I found a cute redhead. Married her. We had 2 daughters. They're in the trailer. This is my mom. My mom, when she was 79, she decided to quit riding on the road because they sold the cottage and there was too much traffic in front of the house. And besides, my 10-mile rides only averaged 15 miles an hour at 79. A friend of mine who was a racer said she would win the state championships if she just showed up. She said, no, I don't want to do that. Well, then one of our daughters outgrew the trailer. What do you do next? Well, obviously, the next thing you do that. Yeah, somebody's actually making something like that. I've seen it. I thought about patenting it, didn't, but whatever. They did. Somebody's making it. It worked. It didn't handle real well at high speed. And you could do U-turns. It hinged in the middle, so it was not too bad. It worked. We didn't use it a lot, but it worked. And then in '95, my wrist got sore, and I got where, notice how high the handle, I'm riding a mountain bike on the road, right? I had a racing bike. Actually, my racing bike was very comfortable until I met the redhead. And then I got her a bike, and we would ride together. Now, when I'm riding alone on the racing bike, my weight's mostly on the pedals, not on my hands or my seat so much, because I was fast. When I started riding with her, my weight was mostly on the seat and my hands, and my wrist started to hurt. And it was wrenching for umpteen years, and truing wheels in particular, probably. My wrist started to hurt, so I bought a Rand's Rocket, because I was between that and the other cheapest recumbent on the market. Well, I don't think I ever knew about the black bent, which is a good thing, because they were really mediocre. There's a prototype of the black bent up here, the Hypercycle. They were hyper-cycle. That describes their handling very well. They were hyper. And anyway, I got the Rocket. At one point I called Rand's back when things were small, right? And Randy himself answered the phone. Randy, who started Rand's, answered the phone, and I said, I'm looking to get a recumbent. I'm not sure if I want to get a Rocket or maybe a Vision R40. They're about the same price, and the Vision is kind of neat. The Vision, you can get a kit to make it a long wheelbase or a short wheelbase, above seat steering or below seat steering. So I can get one bike, and if I don't like this, I can do that. And Randy said, yeah, it is very versatile that way, but you know, it's not really good at any one of those things. And I thought, you know, yeah, but he's right. So I bought the Rocket, and I never regretted it. Later on, we got more recumbents, and there they are. We're getting more recumbents, and we would just, you know, we had gotten into the Lair Burkett personal finance Bible study a few years before this, and we had eliminated our debt. We didn't have much debt, but we eliminated it. My parents held the mortgage on the house, and we hadn't made payments in a while, and Dad came to me and said, you know, he's a physicist, right? He printed out a stack of fanfold paper. Like, remember fanfold paper? Like this tall. And he came in the living room and went like this. I took the payments you've made over the last 3 years and averaged it. If you make that same payment, this is the repayment schedule. Look, I'm not going to live that long. Make payments. We don't want to hurt you. We don't want to, you know, cause you any trouble. We just want you to be consistent. So we said, well, we could pay $150 a month or something. They're like, okay. And we started regularly paying $150 a month. And 6 months, a year later, something like that, they came over to the house for dinner one night, and they said, you learned your lesson. You haven't missed a payment. We don't need the money. Stop paying it. We just wanted you to learn the lesson. So that debt went away. Wasn't that nice? They were so good at helping me when I needed it without giving me enough to hurt myself, right? They loaned me the money for that, but for the bike shop there. The building next door, the driveway was a shared driveway, which legally you can't run a business with a shared driveway. And so I had to buy the house next door for $13,000. They loaned me the $13,000. You know, so that was.
Was that the first time you used the new logo? The logo with the mustache guy?
Yeah, the mustache guy came in 2000, about 2000, yeah. But that one is screwed up to the wall over here because I'm too cheap to throw it out, even though it's in fairly poor condition. We should probably flip it over though, right? Because this side's been, anyway. So we had a web page. Our first web address was bigvax.au.edu/bicycle man. The university let me have some space on the Big Vax, and I didn't know really anything. I'm really not a computer geek at all, but I learned barely enough to make a picture display on it, and I put up this crappy little horrible website, one page, and people started coming from, Buffalo or something, At first time I got a question from somebody that saw my webpage, like, oh boy, a question. I wrote paragraphs, right? Nowadays, I get a question, I'm like, that should be answered on the website. I don't want to answer these questions. Websites should answer questions, not promote questions. They have AI for that now. So then I met a friend who's a good friend now, David Williams. And David Williams was into SEO, search engine optimization. And he did his magic. And it got to the point that we would get phone calls, people thinking we're the manufacturer of the bikes on our page. And there's, a dozen companies on our page. They thought we were the manufacturer because when they Google the manufacturer, we come up first. Dave Williams is part of the reason that it grew so fast. So thank you, Dave. He did a great job for us. He's retired now. And then 2001, so the business was growing. We got Vision. Vision sold really well. It's the only below-seat steering bike we had. It sold really well. The next year, we added Linear and Haluzik, both below-seat steering bikes, and Vision stopped selling. Why is that? Vision was one of the three big brands in the country. Rams, Vision, and at that point, it was Bike E. Well, my thought is that online or in a magazine ad, it looked like a great idea because you could do this, that, or the other. It was so versatile. But when you went to a shop and rode them, you wanted the others because they didn't ride all that well. They work, and people love Visions, and good for them, but that was our experience. So then Linear went out of business. And, being a fool, I bought them. So I was about, 45, 50 at the time. And I would tell my friends, some men my age have a midlife crisis that involves, a convertible or a blonde. my midlife crisis involves bicycle manufacturing, but I have a good chance of getting my money back. This is, oh, wait, there. This is an ad for Linear back when they were in Iowa. And most comfortable seat going, fully breathable, adjusts for a perfect fit. I believe this is the first recumbent seat in the world that has foam under your butt and mesh behind your back. It was also, I think, the first production aluminum recumbent and the first production folding recumbent. Okay? It was ahead of its time. It was state of the art. Yeah, in 84. This is the first Linear with below seat steering here. This belonged to the, is there a date on that? What does it say? No date? Okay. I think it's early 80s sometime. What's that?
One in the back says 88.
88. So this is before 88. The first recumbent, the first Linear ever sold is the silver one over here. This says Con on the side. And on the front, there's a sticker that says Light Gin Cycles. And after I bought Linear, a guy bought a house on Martha's Vineyard. And it was the house that Michael Tilton Thomas, the conductor, had lived in, right? And we like to tell the story that the famous Michael Tilton Thomas bought the first Linear ever sold. We never tell anyone ever that he left it in the basement when he sold the house. No, that is a total secret. No one will ever hear that. Yeah. And so the guy, you know, he looked up online, he looked up Con, and Con makes aluminum garbage trucks. Why would he put a garbage truck sticker on his bike? Well, because the owner of Con started Linear. And that was the first one before they came up with the Linear name. And the front, it says Light Gin Cycles. And Stephen Lightgin was on a Ragbri ride, and a lady passed him. He was on his most new, he was a custom frame builder. He was on his fastest, newest super racing frame. And a lady passed him on a Turizy like this one. And he chased her down and said, "Tell me more, you know, what is this?" And so then the garbage truck business had a slump, and Bicycling Magazine took this blue bike over here, which is the first recumbent ever in Paris-Brest, Paris, okay? And I don't mean one like it, I mean that one. I've talked to the original owner, and asked me later, I'll tell you the story of him in Paris-Brest, Paris. He finished. So that was on the cover of Bicycling Magazine, and Steve, the bike guy, took it to the garbage truck guy and said, "You can make these out of aluminum." And he said, "Look at all those tubes. There's way too much handwork in that. We can't make that profitably." So Steve went back and redrew it again and again and again until he got it down to one tube. And he said, "That we could build." And that's where Linear came from. But they didn't have below seat steering in the first one because it was simpler to do above seat steering. But those handlebars, steering is like this. It was horrible. Terrible amount of tiller. But anyway, I digress, which I'll continue to do. This is Team Linear, their R&D department. And this one is either this one or this one. I think it's this one is the one that hangs up here. And this is Team, they rode Ragbri. Like Linear has had a bike in Ragbri every year since 85 or something. And Steve, that I got this bike from, currently rides a new Linear limo, and he sent me this, and I sent him the limo, and I sent him the limo, and he emailed me and said, "Oh, I got the boxes. I'm going to put it together after dinner. This will be fun." And like a half an hour later, emailed me back and said, "Oh, I got a soda, and I went out in the garage ready to play with the bike, and I put it together in 10 minutes. That wasn't even fun. There was nothing to do. You fixed everything." Well, not quite, but thank you. So then Linear got in financial issues, and they were repossessed by blah, 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 blah. And I made a deal to buy a list of inventory from the current owner, and just before they got repossessed. And we were looking for a place to meet that was sort of halfway between here and Iowa, Guttenberg, Iowa. And we looked on the map, and you know, Detroit's not that far out of the way. So we met at the Henry Ford Museum. And we parked our two vans like this, And then we went like that and shifted all the load. It was severely overloaded, I'll tell you. On the way home, there we are, coming home. That's linear. Well, that was just, I didn't buy the company at this point, just the inventory. And on the way home, we had a flat tire, and it worked out well, praise the Lord. But when we got home, you know, they had some structural issues. So this is a rear frame that broke. They're known for these breaking. That's the thing that'll kill a linear typically, Iowa linear. So I got together with some engineering students and a professor, and they were great. And we did a bunch of engineering, and this is a test stand they set up to prove that they had, they did a computer model like this, right? Where the colors tell you how much force there is. Red at the top of the chart here would be like in yellow somewhere would be like it might break. Well, notice it's way down here. 2 or 3 engineers, well, there's a little bit of green there. So it's about here. So it's like super conservative. And a couple of different, a professor and one of the students put this in his resume and went to get a job, and the engineer from the company was hiring him said, why is he building this thing so heavy? It's ridiculous. You can make it a lot lighter than this. And the answer was that we're already lighter than all our competitors, and we don't want to meet your lawyer. Right? So there's that building again in the background. This time I'm not on top of it. This was only 1 f-stop and 1 shutter speed. And that's the first bike that we built with that rear frame. Then we decided to do a short wheelbase, so this is taking some parts from the boxes of leftover Iowa pieces, because they were in production when they got repossessed, right? So I put in that became this bike. That was the prototype of this bike, and I like it. We call it the Roadster. It's a fun bike. I like it. Anybody recognize the guy in the middle? That's Brian Ball. Yeah, Brian Ball, who started Bent Rider Online. Okay, he worked here. Well, it was the old building. He worked here, and he was a road racer, mountain bike racer, and one of the rules was you have to test ride every bike you assemble. Well, we were beginning to sell recumbents then, so he was building some bike E's. He took his first bike E out for a ride, and he came back and said, "These things are stupid. This is just stupid." Whatever, and he built another one and built another, and the 3rd or 4th or 5th one or something, he came back and he parked it and he said, my dad might ride that, and he needs some exercise. So we bought a bike for his dad. About 3 weeks or a month or something later, he came into the shop all dejected. I'm like, what's wrong, Brian? He said, I just realized I haven't pumped up the tires on my Italian racing bike since Dad got his bike because it's so much fun. And then he started Bent Rider Online, and oh my God.
Peter?
Yep.
Is Brian Ball the fellow that runs the website in Rochester?
Yeah, he used to. He sold it. But yeah, he was Bent Rider Online. Yep. That was Brian. And then in 2013, we won the Recumbent Dealer of the Year. So I was going to the Recumbent show in California, and I'm going to be in airports. I need something to read. So I'm praying, Lord, I want to take a book that's small, but meaningful and fruitful, and will be good for my life to read. But small and light and easy to pack, right? So I'm looking around. I find this little book by Henry Nouwen, Nouwen, I think it's pronounced anyway, that a friend of mine who's a pastor had given me, and he never gave me a book that wasn't good. So it's small, and it's from Howard. It has to be good, so I'll take it. I took it. And, it talks about in Jesus' life, we think our life's going to go like this. We have a little success, and it goes on, and then we have another success, and then another success, and another success. And our life's going to go like this, right? But in Jesus' life, he fed the crowds. They wanted to stone him. He preached the sermon to thousands. They cast him out of the city. So why would I think that my life would go like this when his went like that? Because I'm so much better. No, not that. So, and the bottom line was, when you have a success, don't consider this the new normal. Remember, life is up and down, right? So they were at the dinner, and and the Recumbent Dealer of the Year is Bicycle Man. And I'm walking up front going, this is not the new normal. And the other thing I was saying to myself was I was walking by other dealers going, your webpage is way better than mine. Boy, you have so much experience with this type, and you really, what did they pick me for? Well, the reason they do it, it's a recumbent bike show, and they survey all of the manufacturers that are displaying there. and they vote on who should be the top dealer. So what it really means is that I don't piss off their customers, and my checks don't bounce, and I buy a lot of bikes. That's what it means, okay? So I got that.
Is that shirt the same shirt you're wearing right now?
Well, no.
That looks like the same shirt.
No, I was not a grandfather in 13. No, it was, no, well,
First game.
is it? Oh, it is, by golly, yeah. I was a grandpa in 13. He must be 13 now. No, he's not a teenager yet. He was born several days after our first recumbent rally, and I told the crew here, if she's in labor, I ain't going to be here. And Deb Razy printed this for me, so thank you, Deb. I never noticed that. So then we got more recumbents, and the old schoolhouse got crowded, right? Got real crowded. And smart people ride bicycles. So I went looking for a better place, a bigger place to run a bike shop that would be dirt cheap. Because anybody that knows me well knows I am dirt cheap. We found this place. And I talked to Barbara that lived in the house over here. She moved in 48 as a new bride. And somehow she'd become attached to the property. And I said, you know, I would like to buy the place. I think the old chicken coop would make a good bike shop. And she said, I still think of it more as a home than an investment. And I said, well, good for you, but we would give you lifetime use. She said, come on in. And sat me down in a chair opposite her in the living room and crossed her arms and said, start talking. And we worked out a deal that was going to be good. So we bought the place. And then we gutted it. And at first I was like, it was just a ceiling underneath the rafters. It was going to be a big, boring building. The other building was beautiful, and this one's, but it's big and cheap. And okay, so before I bought it, I took down one of the panels and stuck my head up in there with a flashlight. Is it structurally sound? And I looked around and I thought, oh, those rafters are going to make a beautiful little showroom. So that's how that turned out. And Lee spent a ton of time in here putting insulation on the walls, and we were running the shop. So the way I hired Lee, got to tell this story. Lee came in to get a bike for his kids. And we talked a little bit, and he'd worked in the bike shop a bunch, and that was cool. And maybe someday we'd have a job down here for him. Someday, maybe in the future, who knows, And then he went back, and he came back another day to talk about these bikes for his kids. And I got a phone call, and in the old shop, the storage was mostly upstairs. So I run up upstairs in the back on the phone with the customer, and Lee's alone in the showroom. And I come back, and he's walking around taking pictures. And I said, what are you doing, Lee? He said, well, just in case you hire me, I'm taking before pictures. Lee is the reason this place is well organized. Ben is really good at it too. But if it were left up to me, we don't want to talk about that. Moving right along now. Yeah, whenever someone says I remind them of my father, I think that's a really wonderful compliment. Unless they're looking at my office, then I know it's an insult, because his office was, no, we don't talk about that. So we stripped the inside, we rebuilt the outside. One winter day, a couple came to the old shop and they wanted to test ride trikes, but it was icy and salty out. So we loaded a couple trikes in the car and drove them down here, and they rode around and got drywall dust all over the tires, bought the trikes. A little more work in here. Hey, we recognize that. That's this corner. So then trikes were starting to get popular. You notice here's a drawing of the linear beam, and this is the Avenue. This is the first drawing of the Avenue trike, which is not quite what they built. Anyway, I went to Taiwan. I'm riding in sardine class, right, in the 747. And, my wife's a nurse, so I know you're supposed to get up and walk around. So I get up and I walk around, and it was, all the windows are shut and everybody's trying to sleep. And I thought it was night. Well, it wasn't. It was middle of the day. Who knew? So I get up front where the door that you get into the plane, there's a window there. And I look out the window, and this is what I see. This is Siberia. And I don't see any sign of human habitation there at all, okay? And this is why Russia's not worried about global warming, because they have a whole lot of northern, right? They don't care. Now, so I went to Taiwan, I met the factory, blah, 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 and we ordered trikes. And the first container arrived. It got here a little before we opened, and it parked right out front on the shoulder. And the transmission failed. Right? So Ben, good old Ben, he hooks our little old trailer onto the back of his Subaru, and we drive out there and take 8 bikes and 8 bikes and 8 bikes and 8 bikes, and unloaded the thing.
No tire on that trailer either.
Yeah. What happened?
He
It just
left New
sheared
York
off?
City at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah, the one of the tires blown
It
out.
was such a light load. He goes,
Yeah, you see the blowout there?
Won't hurt it.
He just got
Holy cow.
Yeah. You wonder where those pieces of tire come from by the side of the road.
It wasn't the bad tire.
Well, both of them on this axle are gone.
Cow, tore up.
Yeah, and it's red. So he called a mechanic, came down from Buffalo or something. He was here for hours and hours. Officially, what's that?
They brought a whole new tractor for him so he could take
Oh, did they? Okay.
That got hauled back to New York.
Yeah.
They came from New York. Officially, you have an hour to unload the truck, and after that, it's $100 an hour. So we were like, we're gonna try to get it done in time because $100 an hour, as I said, I'm cheap. Well, we still got it done because we have good guys, and they worked hard, and we got it. It was great, got it done. But then he said, take your time. I'm going to be here for hours. So, whatever. Yeah. So. I go to a church, I go to a Pentecostal church, and one time a visiting preacher pulled me out of the aisle and laid his hands on my forehead and said that God says that He's going to bless your business, draw people a distance, and there's going to be a connection between you and a port on the East Coast, and He's going to make your name known in the business realm He's given you. And I'm like, what would that even look like? I'm a little one-man shop. We made about $12,000 that year. And I thought it was pretty cool if somebody drove 40 miles and spent $300. That would like a big day. So who came the farthest? Besides you.
I'm Cleveland.
Cleveland, okay. Yeah. Yeah, right? So, yeah, isn't that neat? Yeah. It's not my organizational ability. Refer back to previous comments of my office. Okay? No. Praise the Lord. So we moved out. So then, just before COVID, the shop is getting crowded. This is the room at the end of the hallway, which we were using as it wasn't a warehouse, it was a stock room. You know the difference between a stock room and a warehouse? A warehouse must have a firewall between it and the rest of the structure. This is a stock room, which does not need a firewall. Whatever. Even the hallway had boxes in the hallway, right? Even the showroom had boxes. I mean, we were crowded. It was full. The business was doing great, and it was real full. So I got into the laid-back bike report, and I needed a backdrop, so I sat in front of the boxes. What are you going to do, right? And then, of course, everybody knows now the COVID bike rush and blah, 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 right? That was a big thing, and the shortages and all that. Well, in late 2019, we signed a contract for a warehouse, and they broke ground before COVID hit. Okay? And we got ourselves a warehouse. Then I went out while they were running the shop, because they are good at it. They know how to do this, and they don't need me, which is really a good thing. I mean, why would you want to be indispensable? That means no vacations. Nope. So they do a great job. So I assembled the industrial shelving out back while they were running the shop and waiting on customers. And I'll tell you that assembling industrial shelving is a lot like building with an erector set, a kid's erector set, but much better exercise. So during COVID, there's the lockdown, kids are bored, right? So we made some of these. Take an ice box and make a house out of it, right? So we made these and we put it on Facebook, and local families would stop and we'd give them these. I gave one to my daughter. This is my grandson. I gave one to their family, and this is what they did with it. Now that's above and beyond. So now our girls have boys. This is the guy that was crawling out of the house, looking pretty happy, isn't he? And this is our introspective guy. He's going to be an engineer or something. He's always, how does that work? There's a mirror on the handlebar. Why is there a mirror on the handlebar? So this is the shop during COVID. It was really crowded. One point during COVID, I decided that the shortages were going to get worse, not better. Everybody we bought from except Sun and Greenspeed were back ordered, okay? So I called Sun and Greenspeed. I bought everything they had, everything. Every complete try. I bought some bikes from Greenspeed that when they got to ship them, they noticed the boxes were open, there's some parts missing, and they wouldn't ship them to me incomplete. I was hoping, anyway. It was like 45 bikes. That's a lot of bikes to buy at once, but it kept us going for 2 years. So on the laid back bike report, I would set my little table up here with the camera, and I'd sit in front of it, and there's the whole shop full of bikes behind me. And it'd be like a half an hour, well, it's like a 2-hour talk, and with blah, 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 and I'd be into my panel piece and blah, blah, blah. And afterwards, they'd cut off the live feed, and just the panel members would talk to each other. One of the panel members says, "So when was that blue screen picture taken behind you?" And I got up and walked back and said, "It's not a blue screen." So then I had a headset that plugged in, USB, and I got one that was Bluetooth. And then when it became my turn to be on the laid back bike report, I was on a trike and I rode around the corner, rode down the aisle. This is not a blue screen. We are full of bikes, because nobody was full of bikes. The panel was like, "Wait, you still have bikes? We have lots of bikes." So one time I raced at Watkins Glen on the international course. Whoa. My lap speeds were pretty low though. I came in 4th, and I'm getting long, right? It's 4:15. Should I tell this story or not? Yeah. Show of hands, okay. So, I was a big fish in a little pond. Very big fish, very little pond, right? And I won all the races, pretty much. Won pretty much all. I got a first, second, third, and I won, 25 or 30 races. So, I was in this race, and I just stayed with the leaders, and then, like an idiot, I decided the night before the race, I decided that it's a car race track. It can't be very hilly, and I took off the front derailleur to save a few ounces, right? Well, the course was bumpy enough that sometimes the chain would come off, and the first time it came off, it jammed between the sprocket and the crank arm, and I lost 2 minutes. When I went past the start-finish, they reported to me how far I was back from the lead. 2 minutes. So, but then I got it down to like a minute and a quarter or something. Well, I was catching, there were 3 guys up there taking turns drafting, and I was catching up with them. But then I just hit the wall. It was over. I was toast. And so when I finally finished 4th, I crossed the finish line and stopped and put a foot down, and a cheer went up from the crowd. I'm like, what? Well, they've been following this guy, and the announcer had said, "Oh, he's off the bike with a mechanical problem. Oh, he's back on the bike. He's getting close. He's catching up." I didn't catch him, but anyway. So I put one foot in the ground, and I couldn't get my other foot off the pedal. And I laid the bike down and crawled off of it. And I picked the bike up, and I kind of walked over in the parking lot, and all these people are coming, "Oh, well, that was wonderful." And Mom and Dad are there. I rode over there in their little Chevette, and people are talking to me, and I'm like glassy-eyed, and we're walking toward the car, and again, somebody stops us, and they're talking, and I'm like, and it occurred to me that I could lay down, and on the ground, laying there, and this face of a lady comes up to me like this and says, "You look tired," or something like that, and she had a candy bar in her hand. I went, "Oh," and she said, "You want a candy bar?" No, that was when I was standing up. She offered me the candy bar. So now I'm laying there with the candy bar in my hand, and she catches up to me again, and she takes the candy bar, and she puts it in my mouth and puts my hand back down. I've never been so wiped out. It was, because, I'd always been in the lead. I didn't know what to do if I wasn't. I'll just catch the lead, and then we'll sprint. Yeah, it didn't work. So one more bicycle race story, and there was a race in Geneseo. Now, like I said, I was a big fish in a small pond. And I won a lot of little races, but I never went to a race with about 120 people in it, and I never went to a race farther than Corning until this race in Geneseo. Now, Geneseo is near Rochester, and Rochester's a city, and there's going to be fast guys there, but they're flatlanders. So I'm nervous that there's going to be these big city fast people, but they're flatlanders. I'm going to push them on the hills, and that's my advantage. And I got there kind of nervous in the back of the Chevette. And there's, people with clearly more money in their bike than I had. And I get there, and we're a little late, and I'm in the back of the Chevette, and they have vans. And so I put my shoes on, which are these shoes over here, which are a slippery plastic bottom. Very rigid, fast, with a cleat, but slippery. So I've got them on already, and we get there a little late, and we're supposed to go in that building to to sign up. So I run across the parking lot, pretty good traction on pavement, and I run up the marble, or not marble, the like concrete steps, pretty good traction on the steps, and I step into the hallway, polished marble. Whee! And at the end of the hallway, there's this desk with two ladies, and they kind of parted a little bit, and I didn't go down, but I stopped and I signed up and I went back out, and I'm like, so now I'm intimidated by the people from Rochester that were going to be there, and I'm embarrassed because I look stupid now. Then I, get my bike off the back of the rack where it's bungee corded onto the little rack, and then I go over, and I've never seen this before. There was a table with all the trophies on it, and by God, one of them was this big. I told you there was somebody fast coming. They wouldn't get a trophy like that for just anybody. There's going to be somebody faster. So we started the race, and we're going along, and I'm like, okay, watch out. Where are they? Who is it going to be? And we get to the first hill, and I pick up the pace a little bit. Just, I want to pull the fast half a dozen people out of the group so I can start sizing them up. And I get to the top of the hill, and I look in my rearview mirror. It's 150 feet to the next guy. And I just kind of put my head down and kept a pace so that if they catch me, I'll still have a sprint left. They never did. So there's 3 things I can tell you about that trophy. It fit real well in the back of that Chevette. Thank you very much. And secondly, it was really important to me that day. That trophy, winning that race, was really important to me on that day. But today, it's a broken, dusty relic in a box. Notice the top of it's broken off because it wouldn't fit in the box, in the barn. Who cares, right? But Jesus said that there is an eternal trophy that you can work for instead of just chasing around after these temporal trophies that will fade and rust and go away and have no real meaning in the future. So, what is it that you're running for? And is it worth it? There, now I'll take questions, unless you're all bored to death.